Hey guys, Ghazzy TV here with another Path of Exile video with a build guide this time. This is the Elemental Summon Raging Spirits Guardian. And this has been a little bit of a tricky ride at first, because I PoB'd this before the launch and I wasn't happy with the results. However, that was before we knew the aura scaling from the Guardian's Ascendancy were much better. So I had to revisit this, but thanks to one of our PoE Vault members called HealQQ, he made a really juicy PoB, which we have been tweaking to my personal liking. We have a written guide that's been available for the past couple of days, linked in the descriptions down below. So do check that out. And this time I'm going to go through the video guide for this build. Do keep in mind that if you're watching this build or this video long after it's been posted, it might be outdated. So do make sure you check the written guide, because the written guide will always be updated. And the written guide also always have the PoB links for both low budget, medium budget, and high budget versions. So let's just dive into the character, shall we? The gameplay footage you're watching is from a medium budget Elemental Guardian SRS character. It's using a so-called minion helmet, which I'll show you in a bit as well in this video. Basically, the playstyle is extremely similar to that of the Poison Necromancer SRS build as well. However, this one is not going Poison, then therefore we're going full Elemental scaling with the Guardian Ascendancy. Now, before we go further, a lot of people have been asking me about the questions whether or not this is better or not compared to the Poison SRS build. So the differences is very little when it comes to gameplay, because we're still using a Divine Blessing for the aura, we're still casting SRS, the playstyle is almost exactly the same. However, the differences comes to the gearing and the efficiency on when it comes to both damage output, budget-wise when it comes to currency investment, as well as defensive scalings. So how does this build compare to the SRS for the Necro? Now, Poison SRS Necro I would deem to be an S+ kind of tier list character. I would also put the Elemental SRS in the same category. So the difference is this. Currency-wise, it is much cheaper to get an Elemental version of Guardian SRS out to play than it is to play the Poison one, which I think makes this build a better suited character for new and newer players, or if you just feel like you're not the one kind of player that generates a ton of currency. Outside of that, I feel like the investment to this being cheaper is mainly because the fact that we're not going into the spell suppression approach, which means that the Elemental Guardian version will be slightly squishier, not as tanky as the Poison SRS will be at the higher budgets. That makes the Poison SRS slightly better when it comes to endgame bosses and super high-end juiced map content. On the other hand, the Elemental version that we're showing in this video is in fact being able to put out a lot more DPS instead. So which one is better? My personal take on this is that it's a matter of personal preference. It's up to you which one you prefer. I like the Elemental version simply because it is so much cheaper to get going. I'm also a big fan of using minion helmets, which I'll show you in a bit. And that makes this build more attractive for me personally, whereas the playstyle is about the same for both builds. So we're going to dive right into the path of building. Now, do keep in mind that there might be changes to the path of building that I'm showing here on screen. So to make sure you have the latest version, do check out the link in the descriptions below. This is the low budget version, which is kicking off about 3.5 million Shaper DPS. And for those of you who are inexperienced with the way I do my build guides, I'm showing the low budget to be in its endgame fully geared version of the endgame budget. What does that budget mean? Well, the budget means that we're looking at a +1/1, preferably with some minion damage, maybe even attack and cast speed from your minions, and a trigger craft. We're also looking at a recovery on life block shield, which should be going for about 45-50 chaos in the current state of the market. We're looking at a generic helmet that has +2 level of minion skills. We're talking about a tabula rasa, generic life and rest and stat gloves, same thing with the boots with movement speed, a Jinx Juju with death attunement oiled, a generic ring, which should have minion resistances on it, and then a ring, preferably with some Chaos Rest, if you can fit that, a low-rolled Darkness and Throne, in which we're going to put generic life jewels with preferably one sort of the stats of the damage sources. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail. However, my budget build is also including a large cluster. There is no stats on this large cluster, and that is because you don't really care what stats you have on this. For reference, I'm going to show you what level or type of cluster I've been using on my minion build when I've been leveling. This is it. It's an item level 69 trash cluster. You pay 1 Chaos Orb for these clusters. Information about this will be in the written guide, of course. You just buy any sort of cluster and then throw an Alch Orb on it or smack some alterations, and whatever you come out with, that's what you're going to keep. The only reason we're using this is to have a bunch of points we can throw in when we're leveling to get some extra damage. Most importantly, we're looking at a medium cluster jewel giving us a blessed rebirth. This makes our minions immune to all damage when they've recently been summoned, which is how we're going to make these function, similar to how a mage skeleton build works as well. So that's the only thing that stands out compared to many other minion builds in the lower budget approach. There are no tattoos from the current state of the league in this PoB. Obviously, you can change your strength ones to all attributes. You can spec into plus 30 intelligence to get level of all intelligence skills, such as this one, for example. So there's a lot of things you can do with the current league mechanic. Other than that, I would recommend being a little bit cautious with specking into Mind Over Matter and wait with that till potentially going into medium budgets, because the way this build is played is by using Eldritch Battery. The path of building, including the written guide, has leveling steps in which it will show you how to spec your tree as you're leveling throughout the campaign. And as you can see here, we're skipping Mind Over Matter when we're level 43 already. And then at level 70, we're actually picking it up together with Eldritch Battery. But again, if you feel like it's annoying, take away the Mind Over Matter, and we'll take that in the higher budget, which I'll tackle why in a bit. Other than that, Eldritch Battery allows us to move our energy shield over to our mana pool instead. What that means is that we are going to spend energy shield to cast our abilities. This allows for a thing called Divine Blessing, which I'll talk about as well. This means that we don't really care about our mana. We can reserve everything for auras instead, and therefore have a much more comfortable way of playing the game. Skill-wise, we're looking at a 6-link Tabula Rasa running SRS, min damage, multi-strike, wed, predator, and unleash. I would keep unleash for single target, but I do want to point out that for clearing, you would switch the multi-strike for the melee splash. You could switch the predator for something like increased critical strikes if you prefer. It's a matter of personal preference. Trigger-wise, we're actually using Spirit Offering. On lower budgets, you could look at Flesh Offering, but I would keep the Spirit Offering because we're going to want to scale crit with this build. And this goes into the weapon. The other links are a little bit... it doesn't really matter where you socket them. You need Shield Charge and Fast Attacks linked. There's a Frost Blink, Tempest Shield, Determination, Feeding Frenzy on a Stone Golem. You could run a Carrion Golem if you prefer. And then there's Ray Spectre with an Animate Guardian. Obviously, all of this is covered in detail in the written guide. Assassin's Mark and Precision on low budget, as well as a Divine Blessing with Vol Haste. So the only thing that's really important with the skills and why I'm going through them in this video is that Divine Blessing makes it so that you're actually casting the aura for a ton of mana, 500 almost. This is covered by our energy shield through Eldritch Battery. So make sure that you have enough energy shield to afford casting the duration of this. And this is the haste aura. This will have a duration which we're increasing through our mastery. So that's how the Divine Blessing works. And Vol Haste is just a bonus to it. Outside of that, I would recommend going for Pantheons, such as the upgraded Brine King to get freeze immunity, and then Aberrath for reduced duration of ignitions. This is something I use on pretty much all of my minion builds to alleviate from the idea of elemental ailments as we're running with Tempest Shield, which makes us immune to shocks. So this is how we tackle elemental ailments. Outside of that, the build is very, very, very effective at what it does. So this is the low budget PoB, and you can get this started leveling with it. The Guardian Ascendancies is very crazy. This guy right here, as soon as you get this, you're basically just leap slamming or shield charging through the content, and this guy will kill everything. Do keep in mind that you have to resummon him quite often, so you keep him up. His duration is 20 seconds. Once you get the Enduring Bond, he will have a 32.8 second duration. Outside of that, the lab priority will be Radiant Crusade, Unwavering Crusade, because this will trigger our Elemental Relics, which gives us Anger, Wrath, and Hatred aura. This triggers from our minions hitting enemies, hitting rare or unique enemies. So this will be taken care of automatically, and you'll have a very high uptime of this versus bosses. Then we'll take Bastion of Hope for the increased attack and block, attack and spell block. This is very important that we actually use our shield charge to, otherwise we don't get the extra block at 2 attacks. This block also applies to our nearby allies. And last, we'll pick up Radiant Faith. So that is how the low-budget PoB for this build works. And basically costs nothing to get going, 3.5 million DPS with a Tabula Rasa. To mention the Spectres real quick, we are looking at the possibility of race Spectres having 3 Spectres, in which we'll run Pale Seraphim and Arena Master. And if you get 3 Spectres, then we'll run a Carnage Chieftain. So that covers the low-budget PoB. Looking at the medium budget PoB, it's going to take a pretty big leap in terms of cost, because now we're going to go for a Flesh Crafter. It is recommended that you get a so-called minion helmet before you go Flesh Crafter, because then you don't need to 6-link your Flesh Crafter. And what is a minion helmet? Basically, a generic low-end minion helmet has 3, or actually 2, out of 5 different modifiers. These modifiers are very specific, and they will scale our minions, so we're going to socket our SRS minions inside that helmet. There are quite a few different modifiers, so I'm going to list them here for you. One is minion damage. The other one is hypothermia, and the third one is plus level of all minion skills. However, for this specific build, you don't necessarily have to get the plus level of minion skills. There are other modifiers, such as the Essence of Horror, which gives you socketed gems deal 30% more elemental damage. This modifier is one of those 5 you can go for, and it's extremely good. Since we're scaling crit, you can also go for socketed spells, have increased critical strike chance, which is also really, really good for this build. The helmet I'm using in the medium budget character that you've seen in game is actually using a helmet with minion damage, hypothermia, and +1 to spells crit. So it's a very bad low medium budget helmet, but it's a very, very effective way to allowing me to not need a 6-link flesh crafter. So 3 out of those modifiers, 2 if you want to get started into it by getting a non-linked flesh crafter, very effective. Obviously, the medium budget goes into better wands. We're using the helmet. We're going to move into Aegis Aurora, which is going to help us sustain our energy shield with Mind Over Matter. So again, if you felt it was annoying in the low budget, take it away and get it back on when you go medium budget instead. Outside of that, we're going to look at a better role on Darkness of Throne later and having some better rings and gear across the board in general. Do keep in mind that when you have a Flesh Crafter, you don't want to give your Animate Guardian too much Chaos Rest. More information about that will be in the written guide and in the Animate Guardian guide listed in the descriptions below. We're also moving into a big, large cluster. Now, the way the large cluster for the medium budget and higher works for this build is you want to have 12 passive, you want to have a 35% increase effect on it, 3% attack and cast speed, Vicious Bite, as well as a life roll. Something like this is what you're looking for, preferably with a higher life roll, but they're pretty annoying to craft. Very annoying to craft, and therefore they're a little bit more expensive to buy as well. But that's how the medium budget looks. There are going to be some changes in the skill setup. I'm not going to go through them too much. However, since we are limited on the helmets and we are going to switch our multi-strike from melee splash, what you could do is get a white socket either through the League mechanic or through Betrayal encounter with Varici on Research. Then you can switch your Predator as well for something else, which should not be elemental focus, but rather awaken elemental damage with attacks. So why do we not use elemental focus? And that is because of the fact that we actually have the possibility to get ignitions, we get shock, but most importantly, since we are using a hypothermia helmet, we want our SRS minions to apply chill, and they do so through the ascendancy nodes of the elemental relics, giving us hatred. So everything is taken care of by itself. We're looking at block cap, a good amount of EHP on the medium budget, 25 million DPS is actually not entirely correct, because the DPS is actually closer to a little higher than that, because we're using a punishment curse as our Jinx Juju now uses Whispers and Doom, and we go through this, we'll actually do 25 million plus 38.2 million divided by 2. That's actually closer to 31.5 million Shaper DPS instead. So do keep that in mind when it comes to this PoB. If you have any questions, swing by the stream. I'm not going to go through the high budget too much other than show you guys the capabilities of what this build can do. 40 million plus another 62 million. That is about a 50 million Shaper DPS in the high budget. Still cheaper than the approach of a Poison SRS. And this build has some crazy scaling. If you go to mirror tier, we're looking at 75 million DPS. Plus 115 with when they're below 50% HP. It's just absolutely crazy what you can do with this build if you push it to higher budgets. To not make this video too long, I'm going to call it here. If you have any questions, let me know in the stream. Check out the written guide for more details. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more content, comment down below, all of that jazz that makes the algorithm good for the video. You guys are helping out the channel already. You know what to do. If you watch this long, I can't believe you watched this much of just listening to me ranting on and on and on. So, yeah. It's incredible. But I do appreciate the support, guys. Hope you guys enjoy the video. I'll see you guys next time. Till then, stay safe. Keep rocking.